Elite Physique University, your source for all things physique enhancement.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Elite Physique University. I'm John Gorman, your host. Got Jason Theobald, IFBB Pro in the house. Jason, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing good. Spent some time with the family today. Stopped working around about 1:30. We went for a coffee, got in the Porsche and drove around, and then we got sushi. So kind of just needed some socializing. So it's been a good day.
Yeah, we've all kind of been stuck in the house, so it's been good. We've been going like a lot of walks and stuff around the neighborhood. Gavin's been riding.
We did that too. Yep.
Yeah, just getting out and getting around. So, Jason, we got a special guest on the show, man. We've had one guest on so far, Vince Pitstick, your business partner, talk about gut health. If you guys want to go back and listen, but I knew I wanted to get John on the show with us. We both have a history with John, whether we've known him or done business with him. When did you start finding out about the mountain dog, John Meadows?
Me personally, I've known for a while because I was working with Shelby on a prep. And Shelby had just started working with John. And this was when John just was coming out with, all this mountain dog stuff. So then after that junior nationals that year, it was like my first or second time doing a national show. I had John write my training for a year. And he was just getting going. He was still at the bank. So I think this was around 2012 or 2013. So, but I've known John for years because I was a Beverly user being here in Kentucky. And he, I used to see his pictures in the magazine, and they were quite impressive back then as well. So I've known John for years, but that's when him and I worked together when he helped me with my training. Yeah,
man. So John's, he's been part of the Physique Summit a couple times now, multiple times, whether he was presenting or there on the Q&A panel. And we all awarded him the very first Physique Summit Inspiration Award. And that was a fun moment. Cliff and I knew that John should be the very first person to whenever we gave him that award, it was a big deal. I think we had like 150 people there.
Yeah.
But for him to be the first one, Cliff and I talked and we said, this has got to be somebody that's moved the industry forward. Like it doesn't matter, assisted, natural, whether you compete or not, like you move physique enhancement forward, and John's been one of those guys. So it was cool. I got to get up there and try and read words sent in from Dr. Scott Stevenson. I was like trying not to get choked up. Like it's all on YouTube. It was a great moment. But working with John at the Physique Summit, he was one of our most popular guests. So John, go ahead and say hey to the listeners, man. We're super excited to have you on the show.
Well, listen, hey, it goes both ways, man. I'm excited to be here, and you two gentlemen continue to do great things. So I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Man, let everybody kind of know what all you're involved with, because, we're going to do a Q&A today on physique enhancement. But Jason and I were talking, we'd love to do a business Q&A. I think with all three of us being involved in so much different stuff in the industry, I think you're one of the great guests to have on the show when it comes from a business perspective. Can I tell everybody what you're involved with? Because you've got a website, a supplement line, kind of let everybody know a little bit more about that.
Well, I've seen some opportunities in the industry for guys like us to make a good living, to support our families. And I see when things kind of fade out, and then I kind of get some ideas of things that I think might work well. And back in 2010, I started the first real bodybuilding member website. And nobody was really doing it at the time. There were a couple like research type websites, but Alan Aragon had his thing going, but there wasn't any real bodybuilding type member website. So I started that, and it did really well. It started slowing down a couple of years ago, and I could kind of see the industry moving from reading. You can literally see people's attention spans are shortening up, and I could see people really focused more on watching videos. So when I saw this trend happening, I looked at YouTube. It's a tool that I had used, but I didn't really use it for business purposes. I had just created really short, and Jason can tell you, when I used to send programs out to people, I would include really short video links, like 10 seconds, just so you could see an exercise. And about 3 years ago, I saw everybody moving en masse to YouTube. And I did some research, and I could see, between the ages of 18 and I want to say at the time it was like 50, more people were on YouTube than watching regular TV, and it's continued to track that way. So I decided to do an all-out press on my YouTube channel and really work hard on that. It's a great tool. It allows us to really communicate to a broad audience. But in order to really hit that audience, you've got to really work hard. You've got to understand the business side of YouTube, but you've got to work really hard. So, John, we spent the first 45 days, we did a video every single day for 45 days. And then we did 5 videos a week, which we continue to do now 3 years later. So, people see the YouTube where it's at now, I don't know, 350 some thousand or something like that. The watch time, I think it's up to 46 million minutes. But, when we kicked that into gear 3 years ago, there was only 25,000 people. And it took a grind, and it continues to be that way. But it's just like anything else in my business history. It's just taken time, but it continues to go up and go up and go up. And that's been like the real business difference for me. It's been using that tool. I'm getting away more from the member side, getting more into the YouTube stuff. You can just touch so many people's lives that way. You can get so much information out to so many different people. And I continue to work with Granite Supplements as an owner. It's the supplement business is it's a tough business. It's a much tougher business. But we continue to work hard there. We were having a really good year this year when the virus hit. We were on track to do the best we've ever done by far. In fact, January was the best month in our company's history. And so it's been a little bit of a kick in the butt there. We're down about 40% on sales in the last about 4 weeks. That's the numbers I'm seeing right now. I'm sure it'll come back, but it's tough. Anytime you've got a business that has operating expenses, when you have no revenue to cover it, or a lot less revenue, it's tough, right? So I continue to do that. And of course, I have the cell phone app out, which allows people for $30 a month to ask me as many questions as they want. I think Jason, as a lawyer, and it probably seems crazy to give somebody that amount of time for $30 of your expertise. But I do that, and I still coach people. I still got about 40 clients. Probably half compete and half don't. So I guess the summary, John, is I still got my hand in a lot of cookie jars.
And you've got boys playing sports, right? I mean, how busy is that keeping you?
Yeah, they do football, they do soccer, and they do basketball. And basketball had ended, and we were headed into soccer season, and of course it got canceled. But yeah, they're keeping me busy. I play basketball with them probably about an hour a day now. That's typically what we do outside. Play basketball, we throw the football. Alexander's doing the yo-yo thing. I don't know if you've seen any of my videos, but I have him do little guest spots in there. And it's like a YouTube sensation right now. Everybody's talking about Alexander's yo-yo, and he's really, really good. Like I buy him coaching sessions with a guy named Gentry Stein, who is the world yo-yo champion. He lives out in California. So Alexander has 25, 30 tricks on a yo-yo that blow your mind when you're watching him. And he's going to Rubik's Cube contest. He's working on it. He's got it down to about 30 seconds that he can solve a Rubik's Cube. And they're doing really good in school. They both have straight A's. Every once in a while they might get a B, but they usually pretty much have A's. So, just plug it away.
Yeah, man. I mean, I like to kind of paint the picture too before we get into everything. Just kind of how busy and successful you are. So, Jason, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. Definitely. So, to kick this off, Jason and I kind of start every week with talking about something new that we've learned, or something cool that's kind of happened to us for the week. Jason, I don't know if you have anything we haven't really talked before the show, or John, if you want to think. I'll go ahead and start this off. I've got a little short announcement, and then if you guys have anything new or cool that you want to throw in on your end, feel free. I'm going to go ahead and release the date for my Resetting Insulin Sensitivity class. This is something that I gave at the Physique Summit last year. It's a complete protocol, and I'm going to do that online and open that up to everybody. I'm going to have my email in the show notes. You can just email me at john@team-gorman.net. You guys are going to find out about it here before it'll be on social. So hit me up for that. You guys have been bothering me, not bothering me, but like bugging me. Hey, when's the class on insulin sensitivity? So I'm going to do that one in advanced keto. And that's going to be, the first one's going to be the 18th of April at 11 a.m. So that's Saturday, April 18th at 11 a.m. I'm only going to allow like a handful of people in because I really want to spend time. It's going to be about 2.5 hours long. So that's kind of something new I've been waiting on with, Jason, what I'm working on and the other business in the back end. I'm not ready to talk about that yet, but that'll be ready in 4 weeks. So I've just been kind of waiting on these classes. You've been crushing it with your classes, by the way. Probably the best class right now that I think people can get online is your hormone class. Which is kind of, once I saw you doing that, and I thought, man, people are asking me for insulin sensitivity. I just need to go ahead and do it. So what's new with you, man? Anything new with you, Jason?
You know what? I think it's another standard week for me. I'm really blessed that my business seems kind of pandemic, just, proof, really. I've signed new clients. I've actually signed more than I've lost. Everything's clicking along really well. How we position new ethics, being the health side, that's doing well. So, it's kind of business as usual for me, to be honest with you. I haven't really had the downtime that some other people have. And I'm blessed for that. But my next hormone class really is going on just because of demand. People didn't get in the other one. And I open it up to about 10 people at a time. This will be the 5th one. I cover, basically what happens when you've hit metabolic resistance and just feeding up on its own doesn't work. So I show you how to read the lab work, what supplements you need to kind of kick those functions in the ass to get them going as you feed up, as you rest, as you deal with cortisol and all the different things going on. So you can email me about that, jason@scoobyprep.com, if you want to get the brochure. I have a brochure up that explains everything about it. I have 5 slots left. I've already filled 5 in about the last day and a half. So they can get it on my IG too if they want to get a little more info, but emailing me is always the easiest. So that's about where my week's been, man. I've really felt kind of fortunate with everything going on. So it's just kind of business as usual for me.
Gotcha. John, what about you, man? Did you learn anything new this week or anything cool happened to you that you want to pass along to the listeners?
Oh man, what have I done new this week? I listened to 2 hours of the David Ikey interview on London Real. I don't know if you guys know who that is. He's probably the most popular conspiracy theorist out there. That was fascinating to listen to. Yesterday I studied guns. I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos on different kinds of guns, Glocks, and things like that. I'm a man of many interests, so you never know what I'm trying to learn, man. I listen to Yahoo Finance every morning. I try to understand. I've done a little bit of investing in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Me too. Yep.
Now the quarterly reports will be out next week, and they'll be ugly. There'll probably be some movement in the market, but I feel like it's the second quarterly reports that are going to be, if things don't change, we're going to see massive issues and and potential buying opportunities, for people who have some money to put in the market. So,
that's how I'm seeing it. I agree.
That kind of reminds me of something, and then we'll kick off the Q&A. I talked to a lot of coaches. There's so many coaches out there, and there's so many coaches that have had, 5 clients for the last 3 years, and they're just not really making any headway because everyone's a coach, especially on social media. And, as much as I hate to see someone lose business, I don't want that for anyone. I think this is going to kind of trim some of the dead leaves from the tree, so to speak, because guys that have a good established business and you have a loyal clientele, like people like that, they're not going to struggle as much. They're going to continue to get clients and make money, kind of like you guys were mentioning earlier on the show. And like I said, I hate to see someone struggle, but it's kind of survival of the fittest. When something like this hits, I've been waiting for a huge economic downturn. I just didn't know it was going to come from a fucking virus.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I've just been kind of waiting, watching, saving money because I'm paranoid like that.
Yeah, me too.
But I mean, would you guys agree with that? Do you think it's going to kind of trim some of the dead leaves of people that probably have just been dabbling and not doing a good job building a business?
Well, you hear these stories about people on Instagram, but they're sitting out in front of their Lamborghini talking about how well they're doing, and then they have a GoFundMe page up due to the virus. Makes you wonder, like, either they're spending a lot of money or maybe they were exaggerating their success a little bit. it's an easy barrier to entry. So anybody can do the business, but to be in it a long time, it's not so easy.
No.
We've all done it for many, many, many years. So anybody can get in and do it, and anybody can project a certain image on Instagram or YouTube and make it look a certain way, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of business at all. So, those people, if they're barely getting by, then, they may not get by, we'll see. But I think a lot of people, they kind of, I hate to say this. I don't want to paint this broad stroke of generalization, but I think a lot of people are just lazy, and they see getting into coaching as an easy way to just make a little money and have an easy life. And hey, whatever. If that's what you choose, but I like to be a little bit more methodical and plan a little bit better. And, I never left the bank until I felt like I could comfortably handle it. Jason was an attorney. He didn't stop that. You try to plan this stuff out. You just try to make good decisions, right? If you've got a family or somebody depending on you, then you really need to make good decisions. If you're just single, whatever, you can be a little more reckless. But you got to put the work in. You got to build a business, and that takes time. And if you just been kind of coasting along, taking money, which some coaches do without providing a lot of value, then I hope those guys are in trouble. Now, there's another side of that. There's people who are doing their best. They're doing as much as they can. Maybe they haven't built up a clientele yet. It hurts them, and I wish those folks success. I hope they hang in there and we get through it. What my clients are basically telling me is there's no real change, or it's a change in the way they train, or it's hard for me to stay focused. Can we just back off a little bit on the updates until things clear up? All three of those are scenarios I typically see. So, we'll see, guys.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think, John, it is going to trim some fat, but I think also from people that are getting laid off, think about all the personal trainers right now. Like, some of them, if they're go-getters, they might completely reshape their business and get into coaching. So I don't know that we're going to see a ton of numbers leave, because I think some people, if you're a go-getter and you work harder during adversity, you might actually parlay that into something else right now, because you can't do what was kind of letting you skate by. So it just depends on how people. When I always get hit with adversity, I always kind of double down and work harder, almost to the point where, Steph had told me recently, like, I'm becoming a workaholic, and I got to watch that. But some people obviously get crippled by the adversity too. And, it's just how different people deal with it. So I think some people who have lost their income and their go-getters might say, man, I've been wanting to do this coaching thing for a while. I might be good at it. I'm going to try to jump in and do it. Because the reason my classes keep staying full is because a lot of people hit me up and they say, this is a good time for me to get educated. I've heard your hormone class is great. What's the cost? Can I get in it? And so some people are doubling down. So I think it could go either way. I do think we're going to trim some fat, but I think some other people are going to come in. So at the end, I think it's going to be kind of a zero-sum game, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Cream rises to the top. Like, you'll see the champions dig in, and you'll see other people fall off. So, all right, guys, I got to kick this off the right way. Hold on just a second. All right, got to open that can of Monster and get some caffeine in me.
Serious now.
Yep. All right, John. If you don't know, that's my white trash energy drink that I like to drink on the show. So.
Oh, I know you like it. You got me to drink one of them a couple years ago. Yeah.
I know. Well, you were trying to get me to eat Krispy Kreme donuts, so it was a fair.
That is true.
Let's go ahead and get into these questions. Looks like we have 8, 9, 10 good questions. I'm just going to go ahead and start from the top. This first one comes from Tyson Barnes. Tyson asks, do you believe adding bands makes a big difference in muscle growth versus hitting the lift traditionally? And how often do you recommend adding bands? So, John, this is a great question. A lot of people ask questions about bands. I thought this was the best one. You're kind of known as the guy to add bands and kind of specialize in this. Do you think there's a difference if someone adds them versus just hitting the lift traditionally when it comes to muscle growth?
Well, I'll tell you, I made some mistakes with bands when I brought them to bodybuilding. I learned them from my powerlifting days, where we used them for overspeed eccentrics to, like to stop a movement, to be able to then turn the movement around and generate force the other way. And we did a lot of things in powerlifting with bands, but we weren't really using them at all in bodybuilding. And when I brought them into bodybuilding, I thought it's a great tool because You have this thing that I think most of us know about, called the strength curve, where there's just certain parts of a movement that are a little easier. For instance, the top of a squat versus certain parts of the movement that are a little tougher. For example, the bottom of a squat. So if you set bands up in a certain way, there are ways to kind of level that strength curve. And the theory there is now you can provide a high level of tension from A to Z through the whole range of motion, which I thought in theory sounded great. And it still sounds good, but one of the things I found was that, believe it or not, it's actually easy to overdo the bands. I started using them on leg presses, pressing against the band, because as you know, when you do a leg press, the top is pretty easy. Then if you're working against the band, it makes the top just as hard as it is on the bottom if you set them up correctly. So you don't really have a point in the rep where you say, oh, this was easy. You got to literally fight the whole time. And in theory, I thought, man, this is fantastic. Same thing for pressing movements. And what I found was after 6, 7, 8 weeks of doing that in a row, I started to have real joint issues. I think the overspeed eccentrics are what's so hard on your joints. For example, in the leg press example I gave, when you have it locked out, the bands are at full tension, so they're pulling you down real hard. So when you lower it, they initially start, yanking you down really hard. If you just relax your legs, you'll smash yourself. So through a lot of trial and error, I figured out, these things are a great tool, but they can kind of wear your joints out, your elbows especially, from using them too much on pressing movements. So I came around to the philosophy that, I think they're a great tool. I just think you need to be careful how often you use them. So, and honestly, like, I'm using them so much now, I'm like, man, I hope I don't start getting achy joints, but I've never honestly just used bands like the way I'm now. And normally it's just add them onto a piece of equipment, maybe do 3 sets with it. Now it's a ton of band work, but it's not on the machine. It's not on the leg press. So I don't think I'll have that issue now, but I think from my perspective, it's a great tool. The bottom line with muscle growth is to create mechanical tension. And if you can create mechanical tension, then you're setting yourself up to be able to grow. So it's a great tool. But I'd never forget my barbells, dumbbells, and machines. Like, those should always be the foundation, is what I would say.
How often, so say if you're training chest, John, just you personally, and you're doing a chest workout, how many of those exercises are you doing for chest, and how many are you using a band with?
Never more than one.
Okay.
So if I'm using bands like on a leg workout, it'd be one exercise, and there would need to be a reason for it. And if I'm using them for chest, for chest, I might be thinking I need to train some explosiveness today. I like to train explosively just to generate force quickly. And a banded chest press is a great way to teach yourself to create a lot of force real fast. So I might use it, say, that way. Or let's say I'm using, I don't really do barbell squats anymore, but I use a spider bar or a Chris Steffens bar, the transformer bar. I might do reverse band. So I might hook it to the top of the squat rack. And the reason why is because I got a pretty fragile lower back now. So when you get to the bottom of the squat, the bands are going to help you get out of the bottom. And then once you get out of the bottom, they don't really help you much. So there just needs to be a reason. It's, don't just do something to be doing it. Do it for a good reason. Sometimes bands will help you feel the contraction better if you're using them, particularly on chest movements. You'll feel at lockout a tremendous amount of tension at lockout, where you're really pushing with all your force against the band. So, you just need to have a plan on how you're going to use them. I generally use them probably once or twice a month for a body part. Like if I'm doing chest, maybe I'll use them twice a month for one exercise, and then maybe the next week I'll do it again, then I won't do it anymore. So I still use them. It's just not like, if I put up a band video, people used to say, oh my God, you use bands on everything. Well, no, I don't. I just happen to put this video up. So.
Yeah. So is there a particular set of bands that you like to recommend to people? I mean, people can get bands all over the place, but there's quality is a lot different in different manufacturers. Is there a set that you like to recommend?
Well, there is, but they're sold out right now.
Yeah.
So Elite FTS has the best bands. People all the time are like, well, aren't you afraid you're going to snap them? I've been using Elite FTS bands for 10 years now, and I've never had one break in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Great bands. I hear these stories about bands breaking on people all the time, and I've never seen that happen with an elite band ever. Never, not one time. And you got to realize, man, we've used them doing heavy leg presses. We've deadlifted against them. We've used the skinny ones to do all kinds of shoulder stuff, and we've used the thick ones. We've used the medium-sized ones, the skinny ones. We've used them all for years. So the elite FTS ones are good. They just I put up some band videos 2 weeks ago, and they sold out.
I got all my clients buying them too. I put up a video when all this hit because that's what I bought. I bought the multi-pack, and I put up a video too. So all my clients went and bought them too when I pretty much saw that the gyms were going to be closed. And so all of us were kind of putting things up to go grab them. So, yeah, they got crushed out. But I can say what John's saying. I mean, that's the ones I've used since, John had me training with them back in 2010, and I've never snapped one. And I went back to them again and got another pack just for this whole quarantine thing.
Yeah. No, that's great. This next question comes from Megan McMillan. She asks, what's your preferred intra-workout mix composed of for both men and women, and how much water do you recommend during training? So, John, Jason and I did a whole podcast on nutrient timing. We went over our intra-workout protocol. So this is going to kind of be cool for the listeners to hear your take. What do you have in your intra-workout mix, and how much water do you recommend with that?
Well, I do it a little differently now than I did 8 years ago. What I did 8 years ago worked really, really well, but the only problem was I had to use a lot of water with it. The mix I have now doesn't require as much water, so you don't have to drink 2 full liters of water. But what I do now is basically a shaker, 30 ounces of liquid, and I use essential aminos. So that would be the branched chain aminos plus the other additional aminos that are essential that your body can't make, and plus their dextrin for the most part. So that's the mix I use. I use a product called Recovery that Granite makes, and it also has Sensoril in it, which is an ashwagandha extract I'm a big fan of. Really, really good ingredient. And of course, electrolytes. So, so the basics would be aminos and carbs and electrolytes. Then you could tinker around, the pump stuff I usually use in a pre-workout. But if you wanted, you could mix in creatine or whatever you want. Creatine would be good because, you guys have mentioned insulin sensitivity. So obviously your insulin sensitivity is really good when you're using mechanical tension against the muscle and also consuming carbohydrates. So that presents an opportunity to suck that stuff into your muscle cells. But that's pretty much what I use now, John.
What do you like to recommend for amounts and I know that's hard because you might be working with a guy that weighs 275 in the off season and another guy may weigh 200, or a female that's a figure pro. What do you typically if you could recommend an amount for people to start with, if they start working with you, where would you recommend the amount of carbs for somebody during training?
Well, I'll start the aminos. When you look at the BCA part of it, you're probably going to want to be around 6 grams. And the reason why I say that is because you're going to need 3 grams of the leucine, generally speaking, to trigger, muscle protein synthesis, the leucine trigger, they call it. And I like the 2-1-1 ratios. My doctor was the one who originally came up with those 25 years ago or whatever. So, for every 2 grams of leucine, you use 1 gram of isoleucine and valine. So we use 3 of leucine, 1.5 of isoleucine and valine. So, that's what would be in 1 scoop. That does a pretty nice job. Then I have the additional essential aminos in there. Those you don't need mega doses of. You certainly don't need mega doses of tryptophan. You certainly don't want a bunch of methionine. Number one, it tastes kind of crappy, but there's actually some studies in rats that show it decreases lifespan, so you don't want to mega dose that. Histidine, you don't need a ton of once you're an adult. Basically, you just need some of each in there. Phenylalanine, you need a little bit more, but just to make sure that your body's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, make sure that it does have some substrate to help you build muscle. Guy, I might use a little bit more than that, but you really don't need a lot more. You've still got some aminos floating around your blood from your food, but I just find that if you can get a little bit to suck right in there from the supplements, that's where you see a huge difference in recovery. And then for the carbs, Johnny, could be anywhere from 20 grams up to 100. If you've got guys that are taking a lot of insulin and things like that, obviously you're going to gravitate toward the higher doses. But generally, 20 grams for a woman is probably the average dose, and probably 30 is the average dose for a guy. In that ballpark, and then obviously you can go up from there. But I don't think you need a ton of it unless you're using like a lot of insulin or something like that, and then that kind of changes the requirement. But that's generally where I have people start.
Yeah, I know Jason and I were pretty close to that each whenever we did that podcast. If you guys want to go back and listen to that more in detail. But I know a lot of people wanted to hear your answer on that one. The next question comes from Justin Harold. He asks, what are your two best tips for bringing up a lagging body part? My arms just seem like they never grow. So what are your two best tips for bringing up a lagging body part, John?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you a couple of things that come to mind, and then I'll tell you some things that, so let me just start here. So the first thing that comes to my mind is execution. It's how you're training. So if you have someone, I can't tell you how many people over the years have told me, well, my chest doesn't grow no matter what I do. So then I watch them train. And they're pressing and they're caving their sternum in. You can just see literally the force going into their AC joint and their front delt. Or they're doing, a Smith machine incline where they lower the bar instead of on their upper chest to their lower chest. And you can literally see the internal rotation. Their internal rotators look like they're going to pop off their shoulders. And then they always have shoulder problems. So a lot of the problems of what people don't have a body parts is because of execution. If you can fix, and then they want to increase the frequency. Like, well, I hit it once a week. What if I hit it 3 times a week? Well, if you're doing it wrong, 3, 4, 5 times a week is not going to help you. You're just spinning your wheels. So the number one thing is you got to understand, when people ask me that, their clients, I just say, tag me in an Instagram video. I need to see how you're doing them. So I like to see how their execution is first. And if you feel good that their execution is going well, and then you can look at the frequency, you can look at their exercise sequences. Are they using movements they really feel? Maybe it's a situation where like with back, a lot of guys can't feel their back. Maybe their form actually looks really good, but they just can't develop that mind muscle connection. So, you might want to have them slow down a little bit, hold the flex position and really flex the muscle and do things like that. Maybe a little bit of the activation stuff to start with, but then it becomes more of, let's develop that mind muscle connection. And that's something that as a bodybuilder, you're never happy with it. You always want it to be better. Every time you train, I'm sure Jason you guys would both agree.
Yes.
You get pissed off if you don't feel a muscle working.
Yep.
Right.
What's going on? So that's like a never ending battle for us. We're always working on that mind muscle connection, feeling movements work. And sometimes it changes. Sometimes you'll have a movement that feels awesome, and then all of a sudden it doesn't feel good, and something else feels good, So those are a couple things that come to mind. Now, the other thing I would mention is people give up way too easy. And the best example of that is calves. You see people go in, they finish training their quads, a little bit of hams, and they throw in 2 sets of 10 on the calf raise. And they're like, damn, man, my calves won't grow. So I always tell them, okay, for your chest workout from now on, I want you to come in and put 135 on the bar, and I want you to do 2 sets of 10 with the chest. That's going to be your chest workout. Report back to me in 6 weeks how much your chest is growing. So, you get a lot of guys that just give up. They just don't try different things. They don't try hard stretches, or they don't try, maybe a drop set or because they read a study that drop sets aren't all that, or they won't try an incline because they read that, it's all shoulder, it's not going to help my chest. Well, you know what? That all stuff all works together. Your chest, shoulders, all of it works together. So I think people just give up too easy. They're afraid to try things. I'm a big believer in trying things and experimenting. I can't stand it when people say, well, I'm not going to try something until it's proven it works. Okay, well, you sit on your ass and you do that. You just sit there and wait. But I'm going to be out trying different things, trying to learn different things. And listen, if I tried 10 different things and 9 of them doesn't work, at least I found one thing that does work. That's where the Meadows Road came from, just experimenting and goofing off. So that's my thought.
You made a post, it was a few years ago, and it kind of stuck with me, and it makes sense because in the natural bodybuilding world, we have a lot of people that are quote unquote, PubMed warriors, if you want to say that term nicely. But you said something about, stop trying to over science your fucking physiques and make sure that you focus on intensity. How much are you still seeing that today? And what can our listeners gain from that? Because all the research, like we're seeing so much research coming out, and it's a great thing, by the way. Brad Schoenfeld is a good friend of all of ours, and Dr. Bill Campbell, these guys are putting out amazing stuff. But I see so many people getting so caught up in the fucking research and the science that they're lacking a lot of the fundamentals, but namely intensity. And whenever you said that, it was like, I was like, man, I'll never forget whenever he said that.
Well, it's even worse now, in my opinion. The research is great. I keep up with it as well. But I think it's even worse now. I think that people have this irrational fear of going to failure. I can tell you that because of all the interaction I have on YouTube, both on my channels and other things I watch. There's a lot of people that preach never going to failure. And here's what's ironic is they quote, they're evidence-based, but they say that progressive overload is the way to go. And so I ask them, okay, what's the goal of progressive overload? Well, you need to be adding weight to the bar and you need to be adding reps. Well, should it be hard? Well, yeah. Okay, well then shouldn't you be at some point when you're adding reps and adding weight at least coming close to failure then, logically? Well, then they're stumped. Like, here's the bottom line. You have to present a stimulus to your body that it hasn't had to deal with before. That's the whole point of making your body create an adaptation, a thicker muscle fiber being one of the adaptations. So if you don't push your body to do something different, to go harder, then your model falls apart. It doesn't work. So in my opinion, that's the beauty of intelligently doing work that's high intensity, that it's built in. The progressive overload is built in because and listen, if you can do an exercise, let's say you do a dumbbell press, and let's say you can do 80 pounds for 10 reps, and then you can't do an 11th rep. Well, if you do 10 reps, what more could you have done? And that's what I tell people. I don't need to write down that I did 80 pounds in a log book. I know that I could do 10 and I couldn't do 11. So what's the logbook going to tell me? So to me, it's more about intensity and using it wisely. So then you get into, well, how do you do it wisely? And that's where you got to look at the exercise. If it's a compound exercise like a squat, do you want to take a squat to complete failure? Of course not, unless you want to injure yourself. Do you want to take a leg extension to complete failure? Yeah, you might want to do that. You might want to do a couple sets and you might want to go to failure. And then you talk about the kind of the beyond failure techniques. Let's say you do a drop set. Think about ways you can do it safely. If you're on a chest press machine where you pull the pin out, you lower the weight, do some more, that's a very safe way to do it. But let's say you're doing the dumbbell press. So you set the dumbbells down, you get up, you go walk down the rack, you get another pair of dumbbells, you sit down, you just wear yourself out from getting set up. So it's probably not the best choice. So I think if you look at the exercise you're doing, that gives you a clue into how hard you should train. And just generally speaking, I like to take the compound movements to where I got maybe 1 rep left in me. And then right around there, I think if you've done that, you're good. You're probably at 85+% of your 1 rep max, which is going to give you full activation. And then when you get into other movements past that, where you're working more for a little bit higher reps on different types of equipment. Now you can start doing a set of each exercise to failure, maybe beyond failure. So, and I just don't see people doing that now. They're so scared they're going to do too much. And I honestly don't see any, back when the gyms were still open, I didn't see anybody overtraining. That's not something I saw.
I know personally with my clients, I push the fuck out of them. And then if they need it, I deload them. Like, that's the thing. Like, their intensity is through the roof. But, for a couple of weeks, I'll overreach them on purpose, and then I'll do a deload with them, if it applies. But so many people, you're right, they're talking about don't train to failure. But fuck, good luck building a good physique, especially we talk about the natural versus assisted side of this. There's just that point where you have to at least push to the overreaching side of things. Would you guys both agree with that?
Well, listen, who builds muscle easier? Someone who's enhanced or someone who's natural? It's of course someone who's enhanced. So you tell me that a natural can't train as hard or shouldn't train as hard? like they're already at a disadvantage. Now, if you tell a natural, well, no, you can't train as hard, you're setting them up for failure.
Right.
The natural has to train hard. It's even harder for them. It just becomes a matter of managing their volume so they can recover. But they still have to have those really hard sets. You know, if anybody can get away with not training hard, it's the drug guys.
Right.
They're the ones who can get away with it. The naturals can't get away with it. You can't get around it.
Jason, you got anything to add to that, man?
Well, I mean, you know, hearing John talk, I mean, it's everything I do in the gym. And I mean, it makes sense that, you know, I mean, I trained with him for a year, and I mean, there was tons of notes in his plans about digging in and, you know, here's where you got to feel it. And, you know, my biggest thing was chest, was always tough. But everything he was saying is what I had to do. I even had to start back over with really light weight and just throw my ego out. I mean, I'm talking 25s on hammer equipment, and just make myself feel it flex and only flex first and do all these things. And now I'm back up to, you know, 3 wheels on there, which, you know, is nothing impressive to a lot of people, but I can feel every fiber from rep 1, and my chest is coming up really well now. But yeah, you know, everything that John's talking about, it's interesting, but that's literally how I train these days for the last, you know, 6-7 years. Really took off the last 4. It's taken me a while, just even after training under him, to kind of put it all together. But it's all about the intensity. I mean, you've trained with me. I'm not the strongest guy in the gym, but I feel it from rep 1, and I'm grimacing and I'm really into the rep. And, you know, to bring something up, you've got to find that intensity, but the execution of it has to be right. And you might have to pull weight back, because I had to, because chest was my one thing where my delts took over. I have really big delts. And I had to just basically throw my ego completely out and slow my reps way down. I'm talking like 3-3-3 type tempos, and just start all the way over and make sure the muscle was firing first. It took a lot of rewiring for me to get my chest right.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to keep pushing along here, guys. We've got 5 or 6 more questions. I want to try and make sure we get this all done in time. So I probably won't chime in a lot from here on out, because I just like to talk. The next, yes, do you consider muscles being worked indirectly to be part of that muscle's volume for the week? For example, when I do the bench press and my triceps are getting work indirectly. John, how do you kind of play that into your plans, and whenever you help people, do you consider that part of the volume? Is that something you take into consideration when you help people?
I take it into consideration, but I don't. Whoa, got an echo. But I don't count it as a set. So in other words, if I do 12 sets for chest, and then I'm doing triceps right afterwards, I, in my mind, think, okay, I've already got a little tricep work in, so maybe I need to do 8 sets now instead of 12. But I won't go, well, I did 12 sets for chest, and since I was using my triceps on that, I've also done 12 sets for triceps as well. So no.
Do you like to pair up like pushing movements, so chest and triceps together, or back and biceps, or would you ever help someone train like chest and biceps, for example?
Honestly, John, I like to mix it all up, man. Sometimes I love to do push-pull leg splits. Sometimes I love to do random like back and triceps. You know, you could finish your back with a pullover, and it kind of sets up your triceps to work. Or you could do back and then finish with a deadlift and then go into a hamstring movement because they pair well together. I like to just be creative, man. I like to do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one wrong way. But I think it's interesting, especially if, you know, for newer people, do you think that they should stick, or should they just experiment? You think they should kind of put them together, or should they just experiment and see what they like?
For a new person, what I like to do is I like to do them whole body. I like for them to do whole body training 3 days a week. So, you know, like one movement, a body part. And I like to change those movements, some of them on Monday, a different set on Wednesday, a different set on Friday, but then stay with the movements so they can learn them, so they can learn, you know, how to do them correctly. I think for someone who's a beginner, the 3 things you really got to focus on is mind muscle, which Jason was talking about, correct form, which we all talked about. And the third one is it's just progressive overload. It's just getting stronger. And they'll get stronger just from the neurological part of it. They'll just be able to connect with their muscles better. So I like to actually do much less volume, John, with beginners, and I like to keep the exercises. I don't rotate them out like I would with an advanced person. And, then as they move up to the intermediate stage, then, I like to kind of keep some base movement still in, but maybe do a little bit more rotation on the back end. And then they get to the advanced stage, it becomes a lot more rotation because their body adapts so quickly to what you're throwing at them. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. We've got a lot of coaches and trainers that listen to the show, so I know they're soaking all this stuff up because they've got a lot of newbies, they've got a lot of beginners. So the next question is from John from Springfield, Missouri. Cough, cough, in case you guys can't figure out who that is. Who's the smartest bodybuilder in the industry? So think about that, John. Who's the smartest bodybuilder in bodybuilding or just in the fitness industry?
Well, when I hear smart, I think of book smarts and I think of instinct smart. And book smart, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody smarter than Scott Stevenson. Very, very, very sharp guy. Scotty has forgotten more than I'll ever know. Super, super sharp guy. Brad Schoenfeld, you mentioned his name. Brad competed. I consider him certainly, even though he's more on the research end now, he's one of us at heart. Very, very smart guy. Also, those are two guys I have tremendous respect for a lot of people. Those are just two that kind of jump out at me. Instinct wise, it's a little different. Instinct wise, like I always considered myself to be one of those guys. It's you like exercise orders, for example. You're not going to walk into a gym and do a heavy hack squat as your first exercise. It's just probably not going to feel good on your knees. Now, what about like the leg curls before squats? Some of those sequences, Jason, I like them. Some of those sequences can really help you feel movements, and you can just do a lot better. You can't learn that in a book. There's certain ways to train where you're not going to injure yourself. There's certain, like for example, putting a lying tricep extension last in your tricep workout instead of doing it first. You're not going to read that in any textbook, but probably all three of us know that if you go in there and you're doing your triceps and you start off with heavy skull crushers, you're asking for elbow trouble. You're asking for it. So I think when you get guys that have that instinct and that experience, that's a different kind of smart. And, that's where guys, honestly, like you and me that have been doing this for a long, long time, that's where, where we are. But, the first name to jump into my mind, though, was Scott, for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a little teaser here. Jason, I don't even know if I've told you this yet. I think I might have. We talked quite a bit off the air, but the Physique Summit next year is going to be in Tampa. I've already got it set, so we're moving it from St. Louis. And Scott Stevenson, Dr. Scott Stevenson, if you guys want to look him up, he's committed to be one of our speakers. So I'm super excited. Yeah. I know people are geeking out. They're like, fuck, no way. So it's right there in his hometown. I mean, he lives in Tampa. So that's going to be fun. I'm super excited. That'll be his first time being part of the Physique Summit. So you guys can keep an eye out for that. I want to keep this rolling along here. Another training question. This comes from Caitlin Kowalski. If Wonder Woman had her lasso of truth wrapped around you and you had to answer this honestly, you can't lie, John. There's truth serum or the lasso of truth around you. You can't lie. If you could only train one way for muscle growth, would you pick heavy reps with strict form or moderate to high reps focusing on time under tension, the squeeze, and more of like a lactic acid buildup? If you had to grow right now for the next year, answering honestly, which one would you pick?
It depends on if I'm my current age or if I'm 24 years old.
No, right now. Right now.
Well, right now, I would take option number 2. Yeah. If I was younger, I'd probably take option number 1.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that because we've got people on both ends of it. Do you think one has an advantage over the other when it comes to muscle growth? I mean, obviously, I think we would all answer that we need to mix it all in. But do you think heavy reps with strict form has an advantage when you're younger over focusing on the squeeze and lactic acid buildup?
Well, I mean, I think that where older guys get into trouble is – so the progressive overload stuff is fantastic. But let's be realistic here. You're not going to keep increasing your bench press reps forever.
Yep.
It ain't going to happen.
No, it's not.
And that's where option number 2 is really good, because you can continue to grow through other means. So, you know, as you get older, and as you get closer to your strength potential, you have to do more of option number 2, or you're going to get hurt, plain and simple. I don't know too many guys that have been training for over 30 years. I know a ton of guys that have been training for 5 years. You know, that number gets smaller and smaller as people tear their shoulders up, they tear their backs up, they tear their knees up, their elbows, everything. So as you get older, that heavy weight, man, you know, and when you say heavy, so heavy is a relative term. I mean, like doing heavy sets of 3, 4, and 5. Like if you're doing a heavy set of 8 to 10, heavy to me means heavy just means you're going closer to failure.
Yeah.
And if you're doing 15 reps and you hit failure, if you're doing 10 reps and you hit failure, I don't really think there's much of a difference for muscle gain. I just think, like, if you do 5 reps to failure versus 15, now you're going to sacrifice a little stress on the connective tissue.
Yep.
So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, John, I would take number 2 as well. And I mean, I'm 42, but you know, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've kind of just gravitated towards number 2. And, you know, we've talked about how my physique's taken off in the last, you know, few years. And maybe it's because my muscle connection was just always shitty, or I wasn't able to get as much intensity when I was worried about just getting a heavy weight from A to B. But putting more focus for me on 2 has really pushed my physique to another level. But like John said, I still go heavy. Like my first set, I might fail at 20 reps, but they hurt from rep 1, and I finally get to failure. And then I adjust as my body feels for that day. But, you know, I'm not doing anything in 3 to 6 range much. Sometimes because I just don't gauge things right, I might be around 6, but I would take option 2 as well. And when I used to do option 1, I just didn't grow as well. I probably was doing something wrong. You know, if I could go back and be better, I would, but I can't. So 2 for me would be the answer.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, your physique has grown leaps and bounds since 2016 when you won your pro card. So it's definitely something people need to think about, both ends of it. John, I'm going to keep the training questions coming. This one comes from Mac Sims. I heard that you designed some awesome training plans. How do I know which ones are for me, and what's the latest one that you've made, or where do I find them? So, John, you're well known for creating these pretty crazy training programs. Do you have some of those still available? How can people get a hold of you, or where can they find those?
You know, I'll give you a little history here. When I started working with Jason and these other guys back in 2010, I used to write them all down during the week and then email them out on Sundays from home, 1 week at a time. And I worked all weekend doing that, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And it was great. It was great. I'll never forget it. I've built probably around 40 programs. I don't know how many are on my website, probably 25 or 30. They're all pretty advanced. Now, on my website, under the training programs, you'll see a little chart that says, you know, if you have 4 days a week, you can train, or if you want to train 6 days a week, or if you prefer push-pull, or if you pull higher, if you prefer higher volume, lower volume. So there are some options on there. Now, one of the things that, you know, you guys mentioned that during this quarantine, you know, how you're working. So I want to share one of the things I've been doing with you. I was thinking about, you know what I've never done? I've never created a program for beginners or really intermediates, a really good one. So I thought I would take this time to do that. So I'm working on a beginner program. I'm about 80% done, and then I'm going to follow it up with an intermediate program as well. So I don't really have anything on my website for beginners or early intermediates. It's more for people that have been training for a long time, but that stuff's coming. And it was kind of interesting because it just kind of took me back. And I really thought about like, how would I train the beginner? Like, what would I do?
Yeah.
You know, what is a beginner? So it was a really cool exercise for me. It took me back to when I was, you know, training people at World Gym in my early 20s that were beginners. So so whenever this quarantine ends, I'm going to have advanced, I got another advanced program that's ready.
I had actually launched it, and then we went on quarantine, so I never advertise it anymore. I thought that'd be pretty stupid. So it's actually on my website. It's called the Grandmaster, but I just never advertise it. And then so I'm going to have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced stuff as soon as this quarantine's out, because a lot of people are going to be excited to get back to the gym, to get to work. There's probably some people who maybe are going to be a little more conscious about their health now and being healthier. So there's going to be a lot of people looking for good training. So I've been kind of taking this quarantine to build all that stuff as well.
Yeah, it's mountaindogdiet.com if you guys want to check it out. I'm going to have it in the show notes as well if you want to click on that after the show. Just click on training programs, and you'll see some cool shit like John just mentioned, the Grandmaster, Odin Force, Project Colossus, Creeping Death, Doomsday, Carnage. There's all kinds of good programs on here, so you guys can check that out. Pretty cool names, man, which I love because you kind of make that part of who you are. I think that's just kind of cool.
I wanted to interject something there when we were talking about, training a beginner and what would you do? For me, I started lifting in college as a need because soccer, I just wasn't big enough. And the strength coach for football team taught us. And it was more about just moving the weight from A to B and being strong and, just getting stronger. And I guess that's one way to go about teaching a newbie, but I really wish someone would have sat me down and said, look, just because this is a chest press doesn't mean you're going to feel the chest. You've got to angle it right. You've got to set the seat right. You might have to lean forward. You might have to lean back. And I don't care about how much weight's on there. I want you to feel that muscle work. And I think if someone would explain that to me earlier on, I probably would have grown a lot better earlier on. And I know there's probably some guys who sit down and really figure that out right away, but I really didn't right away. I figured, well, it's a chest press. It's going to make my chest work. I just have to get this lever from A to B, or, it's a dumbbell if I'm flat. So if I press it up, it's going to hit my chest, but where you put your elbows, how far out, how far in, whether just all these different cues. I wish I just would have had more of that from the get go. As a beginner, and if I had a beginner who came up to me and said, I want to train with you, there's so many cues and different things that I would give them that I think would speed them past what I was given. So yeah, I've thought about that myself, John. I think that's pretty cool what you're doing. So,
well, I have a series on YouTube that I had started, and it was 21 reasons why your X won't grow, your back won't grow, your calves, whatever. And it was all those little things that Jason's mentioning. It was, if you're doing a row, what do you do with your sternum? What do you do with your elbows? It's all those little tips that you're right. If somebody would have taught you that from the beginning, it would help. And to your point, Jason, in my beginner program, I listed all those videos. Watch these videos before you do anything. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's really cool. I mean, if someone really buys in, it's going to make them a much better bodybuilder much quicker than I did.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions left. The next one comes from Diana Gear. She's going to have a little fun with you here for a second, John. We all know Diana, great athlete. Diana says, what's the best way to use supersets to optimize your training? I'm old like you, but I like to push. # old man cranking. I may have talked her into calling you old. So the funny thing is, Diana's a great athlete, into her 50s, she's a client of mine, sets the standards for a lot of my clients, but I said, hey, you got to call John old. Let's have some fun with him on the show. So what do you think, John?
Well, I'm going to be 48 on Saturday. So
nice.
Well, you kind of started the # old man cranking.
I did.
Movement.
I need to get back to it. I need to get back to that. I know. I mean, supersets is it's a nice way to train and get a lot of blood into the muscle and fatigue the fibers without crushing your connective tissue potentially. So you're just doing a lot of work in a short amount of time. If I'm going to do a superset, what I would normally do if it was for chest, legs, or back is I would do a couple of the base exercises first, and then I would do the supersets. If it's arms, I might just do all supersets. It's just another tool. It's just another way to fatigue the muscle fibers. At the end of the day, you just need to fatigue the muscle fibers. You need to load them and fatigue them. Whether you do that with a superset or a set of 15 or 10 to failure, then 10 more partials, doesn't really matter. It's just fatiguing the muscle fibers. And that's one tool. That's just one way to do it.
Can you give somebody an example of your favorite superset if you were going to train in the gym today and you were going to just pick your favorite thing, what would it be?
So normally what I want to do is I want the exercises to be complementary too. So like, for example, if you supersetted a back squat and a front squat. Yeah, I mean, are they different? Yeah, they're a little bit different, but I'd rather someone superset like a leg extension with a squat. You know, the leg extensions, a lot more rectus femoris, a little different muscle, whereas the squats are probably more vastus lateralis and vastus medialis, and depending on your stance, maybe even a little more adductor. Actually, depending on how deep you go, maybe some more adductor. You know, if it's triceps, it might be a push down that's maybe geared more toward the lateral head into an exercise where you're really stretching the long head. So I try to use exercises that complement each other, and it's not redundant is my point. If you're going to do something redundant, then just do a drop set. Just lower the weight and keep going. There's no sense in changing exercises.
And it was on my end, John. I've got a follow-up question. You may have said it earlier, but on my end, I was cutting out. We're fine, but if you already answered it, then that's fine. How often do you recommend people do supersets? Do you think there's a limit to how often they do that? That's kind of the follow-up question that was asked here.
I mean, you could do a whole workout if you want, all supersets. I did one today, the band one I did on YouTube. I mean, but you don't want to do this. You don't want to always do that because now you're in a situation where you're not resting, so you're a little more fatigued. But you're not recuperated to do more weight. So
yep.
Yeah, so I wouldn't do the whole workout that way. That's why I said I would rather see somebody do their base movements where they're taking their time and using good form and doing hard sets of 8 or 10 first, and then do the superset. So, if you want to pick 2 exercises and do 4 sets, that's what I would typically do, John. So it would basically be 1 pair of exercises for 4 sets is what I would generally do if I'm going to add it into the workout.
That's great stuff. I know our listeners are loving your take on all this stuff. There's been a lot of good training questions here on the show. And we're about to get to our last one and what I think is the best question. But before we do that, Jason, I do want to let our listeners know we're at 275 reviews. We're up like 35 reviews in a week. So you guys are crushing it. Thank you so much. This would be a great time to hit pause, leave us a review. We really, really appreciate that. We're only like 19 episodes in. And you guys are leaving a ton of reviews. And next week, we announce the winner that gets the free year to prep with me. I'm super, super excited about that. So that will be on next week's show. I forgot to say that in the beginning, so I need to go ahead and plug it in now. So what I need you guys to do is screenshot your review that you leave and make sure you message it to me on Instagram and tell me you want in the drawing. I've got like 50 people in there right now. It's been great. So thank you guys, Jason and myself. You guys are really crushing it. All right, John, let's get back to this. The very last question comes again from this John from Springfield, Missouri guy. He's kind of a bother here. He wants to know, how bad did you cry in Avengers End Game, and what's the number one thing that you wanted to see happen in the movie that didn't happen?
Okay, so first of all, you're going to think I'm an insensitive, evil dude. I didn't cry.
What?
Iron Man was like not one of my favorite characters. He's a cool dude. I liked him. I didn't cry a lick. Now, I cry. I'll tell you when I cry when I watch movies is when animals get hurt. Like if I'm watching a movie and an animal gets hurt, I'll be like, okay, I'm starting to cry. I got to turn the camera. But in terms of the movie, I really liked the one before that. Infinity War. I really liked that one. I liked the last one, but the one before it I thought was way better. So
well, let me ask you a crying question then on that one. Did you cry at the end when Peter Parker was disintegrating and he was scared? Did that get you?
No, not a lick.
Damn, John, like I would have pegged you as the guy that cried in both these movies. Like no offense or anything. I mean, I got choked up, and I'm not a super emotional guy, so I thought,
okay, I'm that would have got you. Just so you guys can laugh at me. I'm not afraid to have people laugh at me. So I'm going to tell you the last time I cried really hard during a movie. I was coming back from Australia, chilling out in business class, watching movies,
Mhm.
and A Star Is Born came on. Now, I was crying so much, like all the people sitting around me were looking at me like, what's wrong with him? And then like 10 minutes later, they were all watching it. They were like, man, I got to see what movie's
gotta
making
see
this guy
this.
cry. I was crying like a baby from that movie, man.
Yeah, speaking of animals, Marley and Me got me. Like after you watch that whole movie and then the end, you're like,
Yep.
geez, gosh, killing me.
Oh, that's hardcore. I
Ye-
agree with you. I agree.
Oh man, that was a rough one.
Jason, did you get choked up in the Avengers End Game movie at all?
No, I don't really am not going to get choked up over people generally in a movie. It's really pretty hard for me. But you heard an animal or, let me get connected with an animal character the whole movie and then something bad happens. I'm holding it back pretty hard.
Maybe I just need to take an anti-estrogen or something because I was freaking crying at both those motherfuckers. I was like, hoping nobody looked at me in the movie. John, what was the number one thing that you wanted to see happen in either one of those end game, both the last Avengers movies? What's the number one thing that you wanted to see happen that didn't happen?
Well, I was a big fan. I mean, I had the books, I had the graphic novels many years before any of this was ever a storyline. And I was always saying, God, I wish we had two movies. I wanted a Galactus movie, which I've never got. The pathetic attempt at the Fantastic Four with Galactus was pathetic.
Yeah.
I wanted to see a movie where you saw what happened to Galen on his planet, where the radiation was coming to kill the planet. Him and his buddies got in a spaceship. They flew into the radiation. Then he wakes up years later in space, and he's Galactus. And then he comes to Earth, and he goes to Norrin Rad, the Silver Surfer's planet, and the Silver Surfer says, "Well, spare my planet, and I'll be your herald." I think that would be phenomenal if they just did it right. They just need to do it right. And then the other thing I always wanted was a Thanos movie. So I knew the Thanos storyline pretty well, and I've got Thanos' first appearance in the Thor comic. So I've always been a real big Thanos fan. I've got some Avengers comics that are real old with him in it as well. But so I was looking at it from the history perspective, and the part that disappointed me was there was a guy in it. Warlock was a big part of that story.
Yeah.
And Warlock wasn't in it. We saw a reference to a Warlock in one of the movies where the Collector, I think, had the Collector, by the way, the Collector and the Grandmaster. So the Collector, who was played by Benicio del Toro, and the Grandmaster, which was played by Jeff Goldblum, those two were gods. Those two were very, very powerful in the comics. But anyways, I wanted to see Warlock, and there was really no Warlock involvement at all. And he was very powerful. Particularly his ability, I think was it the Mind Gem? The Mind Gem he was in. And then anyways, I wanted to see Warlock, and there was no sign of him anywhere. So that's the one thing I was disappointed in.
Yeah, and maybe they're leaving it open to kind of like the Infinity Watch movies afterwards. I know for me on my end it was, and Jason, I don't know if you have anything to add here, if there was something you wanted to see, but on my end, I was really, really hoping, because this was back when Disney was like kind of getting Fox and getting the rights to the X-Men. And I was like, in Logan, the Logan movie where Professor X and Wolverine went out, and that was the last time they were going to be in a movie. And they did such a great job. By the way, I cried in that fucking movie too. So I was kind of hoping that we would see at the very end of Endgame, when Doctor Strange opens up the portals and everybody starts coming out, I was like, please tell me we're going to see Wolverine as Hugh Jackman one more, you know what I mean? Like see him and Professor X, and like kind of some of this crossover stuff that we may not ever see again. And I thought, come on, Disney, Marvel, just make it fucking happen. Pay them whatever they want. Like you kind of owe it to us. That was kind of the one thing I wanted to see, but as we all know, that kind of didn't happen. That would have been cool, though. Yeah, it would have.
That would have been great. Yeah.
What about Jason? You cold-hearted bastard. What did you want to see that didn't happen?
I don't have much to add. Like when I watch the movies, like I appreciate them and they're great entertainment, but I wasn't like a fanboy growing up or anything. Like the only thing I was into was like soccer, and that was it. I wasn't into music or anything until I got older. So I don't have anything to to really add great to the conversation other than I enjoyed the movies, but that's about it.
No, it's a good, fun way to end the show. John, we really appreciate you having the time to come on and making the time for all of us and listeners. I'd love to have you on again, by the way, in the future. Is there anything you'd like to shout out to anybody or say to anybody before we go off the air?
No, just go to my YouTube. It's Mountain Dog One. Subscribe. Check out. I've been busting my butt making videos, over 1,000 videos now. And then I'm always looking for support from my supplement company, Granite. If you can support me there. We just launched a protein powder that's doing really, really well. I'm super happy with it. It's a blend. That's pretty much it, John.
Yeah, man, I'm going to have all your stuff, your website, your YouTube, your Instagram, everything that, guys, it's in the show notes. Wherever you're listening to this podcast now, you should be able to just click on details and you can have links out to John and all of his stuff. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. For myself, Jason, and our guest, John, we're out of here. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.